Hello, fellow seekers of the unknown. Before we dive into tonight's chilling tale, I hope you're having a wonderful day, wherever you are in this vast world of ours. Whether it's morning coffee in New York, afternoon tea in London, or late night contemplation in Tokyo, thank you for joining me on this journey into the depths of conspiracy and terror. If you enjoy stories that blur the line between fact and nightmare, make sure to subscribe to Sleep Theories, because some truths are too dark for daylight. Now settle in as I share with you a declassified account that will forever change how you look at the ocean's endless, unknowable depths. Former deep-sea engineer, NASA Oceanic Division, 1957 to 1963, declassified, March 15th, 2023, classification level, redacted, date, September 12th, 1957, location, classified research facility, Point Reyes, California. My name is Dr. Evan Hartley, and if you're reading this, then either I'm dead, or the world finally deserves to know the truth about why NASA abandoned the ocean for the stars. I'm 39 years old, an oceanographer by training, and until 6 years ago I believed the deepest mysteries of our planet lay in the cosmic void above us. I was wrong, catastrophically, terrifyingly wrong. When NASA was established in July of 1958, the public narrative was simple. America needed to compete with the Soviets in space. What they didn't tell you was that NASA's original charter included extensive deep-sea exploration programs run parallel to our early aviation development. Before we ever dreamed of touching the moon, we were diving deeper into our own planet than any human had gone before. I was recruited in late 1957, months before NASA's official formation. The letter arrived on Yale University letterhead, but the signature was from someone I'd never heard of, Dr. Marcus Webb, Director of Aquatic Research, National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. The offer was generous, triple my university salary, unlimited research budget, and access to the most advanced submersible technology ever developed. The catch? I couldn't tell anyone where I was going or what I was doing. Not my wife, Sarah, not my colleagues, not even my mother. The facility at Point Reyes looked innocuous enough from the surface, a collection of weathered buildings perched on the California coastline, indistinguishable from a dozen other government research stations. But beneath those structures lay something extraordinary, a vertical shaft descending 300 feet straight down into the bedrock, wide enough to accommodate submersibles the size of small buildings. Dr. Webb met me on my first day, a gaunt man in his 60s with prematurely white hair and the kind of hollow stare I'd later recognise in combat veterans. "Welcome to Project Nautilus, Doctor. Hartley," he said, leading me through a maze of steel corridors that hummed with the constant vibration of massive machinery. "I trust you understand the sensitive nature of our work here." "Oceanic mapping," I replied, reciting the vague description from my recruitment letter. "Deep-sea cartography for national defence purposes." Webb stopped walking and turned to face me. "That's the public explanation, yes, but you'll find that the ocean holds more secrets than any map could ever reveal." He led me to an observation deck overlooking the central shaft. Below us, suspended by massive cables, hung the most beautiful machine I'd ever seen. The submersible was unlike anything in the civilian world, a sleek, elongated sphere of titanium and steel, bristling with cameras, sonar arrays and collection arms. According to Webb, it could dive to depths of 15,000 metres and withstand pressures that would crush a conventional submarine like an eggshell. "We call her the Cousteau," Webb said, after the French explorer. "She's taken us places that don't exist on any official chart." Over the following weeks, I learned the true scope of Project Nautilus. We weren't just mapping the ocean floor, we were investigating anomalies. Specifically, non-terrestrial acoustic signatures detected by Navy hydrophones in the deepest parts of the Pacific. These weren't whale songs or geological activity, they were patterns, rhythmic, mathematical, and utterly alien. The first recording was made in 1954, Webb explained during one of our late-night briefings. A hydrophone array near the Mariana Trench picked up a sound unlike anything in our databases. The frequency was too low for marine life, too regular for tectonic activity. When we mapped the source, it originated from a depth of nearly 11,000 metres, deeper than anything should be able to survive. He played the recording for me on the facility's most advanced audio equipment. Even filtered through speakers, the sound made my teeth ache. It was a low rhythmic pulse, lub-dub, 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 like a massive heartbeat echoing from the bottom of the world. "How many recordings do you have?" I asked. "Hundreds, from trenches across the Pacific, the Mariana, the Tonga, the Kermadec, all at depths between 10 and 15,000 metres, all following the same pattern." Webb's face was grim. "And Dr. Hartley? They're getting stronger." Date: November the 3rd, 1959. Location: Pacific Ocean, 275 nautical miles southwest of Guam depth, 13,247 metres. Our third deep dive began like all the others: methodical preparation, systems checks, and the familiar ritual of descent into darkness. I was accompanied by Dr. James Morrison, our marine biologist, and Chief Petty Officer Samuel Torres, our dive specialist on loan from the Navy's most classified underwater programs. The Cousteau began her descent at 0800 hours, slipping through the ocean's layers like a steel teardrop. At 1,000 metres, we left the last traces of sunlight behind. At 5,000, we entered the abyssal zone, where no natural light had ever penetrated. By 8,000 metres, we were in territory that belonged more to the moon than to Earth. But it was at 13,000 metres that we found something that shouldn't exist. "Sonar contact," Torres announced, his voice tight with concentration. "Dead ahead, range 200 metres. It's big." Through the Cousteau's reinforced viewport, our floodlights illuminated a sight that defied explanation. Rising from the sea floor like an ancient mountain was a structure, but not a natural one. The surface was covered in perfectly hexagonal panels, each one roughly 30 feet across, arranged in a pattern too precise to be geological. "Are you recording this?" Morrison whispered, his face pressed against the observation port. "Everything," I confirmed, though my hands were shaking as I operated the cameras. "How large do you estimate it to be?" Torres was studying the sonar display with growing amazement. "The structure extends at least 800 metres in diameter, but the depth, Jesus Christ, it goes down another 2,000 metres from here." As we approached the structure, our instruments began registering impossible readings. The water pressure at this depth should have been crushing, over 1,300 times the pressure at sea level. But our gauges showed localised areas where the pressure dropped significantly, as if something was actively counteracting the ocean's weight. "That's impossible," Morrison muttered. "Nothing could survive down here, let alone generate enough force to create pressure anomalies." But something had survived. As we manoeuvred closer to the hexagonal surface, our audio pickups detected it. That same rhythmic pulse we'd been tracking for years, but now so powerful it resonated through the Cousteau's hull like the beating of a massive heart. "It's not coming from the structure," Torres reported, studying his instruments. "It's coming from beneath it." That's when Morrison made the decision that would haunt us all. Against protocol, he suited up in one of our experimental deep-sea diving suits and insisted on collecting a sample from the structure's surface. The suit was a marvel of engineering, a self-contained environment that could theoretically protect a human at crushing depths. "Just a quick sample," he said through the comm system as he prepared to exit the submersible. "We need physical evidence." I should have stopped him. I should have ordered Torres to abort the dive and return to the surface. Instead, I watched through the Cousteau's cameras as Morrison emerged from the airlock and approached the alien structure. For 20 minutes, everything proceeded normally. Morrison collected samples from the hexagonal panels, documenting their composition and arrangement. His readings showed materials that didn't match any known elements, compounds with atomic structures that seemed to shift and change even as he observed them. Then the pulse stopped. The silence was absolute. No marine life, no geological noise, no equipment hum, just the complete suffocating quiet of the deep ocean. Through our cameras, we watched Morrison frozen beside the structure, his helmet lights casting stark shadows across the hexagonal surface. "Morrison, report," I called into the comm. "What's your status?" His response when it came was barely a whisper. "It knows we're here." The structure began to glow. It wasn't bright, more like bioluminescence than artificial light, but it was unmistakably deliberate. The hexagonal panels pulsed in sequence, creating patterns that moved across the surface like neural networks firing. And with each pulse, that rhythmic beating returned, stronger than before. "Morrison, get back to the sub, now!" But Morrison wasn't moving. Through the camera feeds, I could see him standing motionless, his helmet pressed against one of the glowing panels as if he was listening to something we couldn't hear. "Can't you hear it?" His voice crackled through the comm, distorted by interference that shouldn't exist at our depth. "It's not dead. It's dreaming." Torres was already suiting up. "I'm going after him." But before Torres could exit the airlock, Morrison began moving again, not toward us, but along the structure's surface, following the patterns of light like a moth drawn to flame. His movements were wrong, too fluid, as if the crushing pressure had no effect on him. "Morrison, you're exceeding safe operational limits," I warned. "Return to the submersible immediately." "So beautiful," Morrison's voice was dreamy, distant. "It's been dreaming for so long, dreaming of the surface, dreaming of the sky." The structure's glow intensified, and Morrison stopped. Through our cameras, we watched him turn back toward the Cousteau, but something was wrong with his posture, with the way he moved. When his helmet lights illuminated his faceplate, Torres cursed. Morrison's eyes were gone, not damaged. Gone, as if they had never existed. But he was still moving, still navigating perfectly through the crushing darkness. "It wants to wake up," Morrison said, his voice now coming from multiple directions at once, as if the ocean itself was speaking. "It's been sleeping so long, but the dreams are getting stronger. Soon it won't need to dream anymore." That's when Torres made the hardest decision of his naval career. He activated the Cousteau's emergency ascent system, cutting Morrison's tether and abandoning him to the depths. As we rose toward the surface, our last image of the structure showed Morrison standing motionless among the glowing hexagons, his arms spread wide as if embracing something we couldn't see. The rhythmic pulse followed us up through 13,000 meters of black water, growing fainter but never disappearing entirely. Morrison's body was never recovered. Officially, he suffered a catastrophic equipment failure during a routine deep-sea research dive. His wife received a flag and a commendation for his service to scientific progress. But for 3 days after we surfaced, I could hear him whispering in my quarters at night, "It's not dead. It's dreaming." Date: February 15th, 1963. Location: Point Reyes Research Facility. The end came without warning, which should have been warning enough. I arrived at the facility on a cold February morning to find armed guards at every entrance, and men in dark suits loading equipment into unmarked trucks. Dr. Webb met me at the main gate, his face haggard and aged beyond his years. "Project Nautilus is terminated, effective immediately," he said without preamble. "All personnel are to report for debriefing and reassignment." What happened? Did we have another incident? Webb glanced at the suited men supervising the equipment removal. "Walk with me, Doctor. Hartley." We moved away from the main buildings toward the cliff overlooking the Pacific. The morning fog was thick, obscuring the horizon and muffling our conversation. 3 days ago, our satellite thermal imaging detected massive heat signatures rising from the deepest points of the Pacific Basin, Webb said quietly. Not geological. The patterns were too organised, too purposeful. Something down there is powering up. I felt ice forming in my stomach. The structures we found, all of them, simultaneous activation across 17 different trench systems. The energy readings are off the charts. We're talking about power generation on the scale of nuclear reactors, but using principles we don't understand. Webb pulled a manila folder from his coat and handed it to me. Inside were thermal satellite images showing the ocean floor lit up like a Christmas tree, with bright spots clustered around the deepest trenches. "NASA is shifting all funding to space exploration," Webb continued. "Officially, oceanic research is being transferred to civilian agencies. Unofficially, ... He gestured toward the men loading trucks. There will be no more official oceanic research. They're covering it up. They're prioritizing. Space exploration offers hope, progress, a bright future for humanity. What we found down there, Webb shook his head. What we found offers only questions we're not ready to answer. The debriefing took place in a windowless room with men who never gave their names. They confiscated all my research notes, my personal logs, even photographs of my family that had been in my desk drawer. In exchange, I received a generous severance package, a glowing letter of recommendation, and a document that would send me to federal prison if I ever spoke publicly about Project Nautilus. Dr. Hartley, the lead interrogator said as the session concluded, "You've served your country with distinction. We trust you understand the importance of maintaining operational security regarding your work here. What about Morrison? What about the others who didn't come back?" The man's expression didn't change. "I'm not familiar with any such incidents. Project Nautilus was a mapping and research operation. All personnel completed their assignments successfully." I was escorted from the facility that same day. As our car pulled away from Point Reyes, I looked back to see smoke rising from the equipment disposal area. They were burning everything: documents, photographs, even the submersibles that had taken us to the bottom of the world. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from NASA headquarters. I had been selected for reassignment to their new Lunar Surface Analysis Division, effective immediately. The salary was excellent, the work was prestigious, and the security clearance was higher than anything I'd held before. I declined the position. 3 months after that, I was quietly discharged from government service entirely. My security clearance was revoked, my research credentials were questioned, and my applications to private sector positions were mysteriously rejected. Dr. Evan Hartley, former deep-sea explorer, became Dr. Evan Hartley, unemployed oceanographer with a suspicious gap in his resume. But I wasn't the only one asking questions. Dr. Patricia Vance had been a communications specialist on Project Nautilus, responsible for analysing the acoustic signatures we'd detected. Like me, she'd been debriefed, reassigned, and eventually discharged. Unlike me, she'd managed to keep copies of some critical data. We met at a coffee shop in San Francisco 6 months after the project's termination. Patricia looked older, more cautious, but her eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made her invaluable to the project. "I've been thinking about what we found down there," she said, stirring her coffee with nervous energy. "The patterns in those acoustic signatures, they weren't random." "What do you mean?" "I mean they were mathematical. Prime number sequences, Fibonacci progressions, geometric ratios that appear in nature. Whatever's down there isn't just making noise, it's trying to communicate." Patricia slid a manila envelope across the table. I kept copies of everything. The acoustic data, the thermal readings, even some of Morrison's final transmissions before... She trailed off. "Before he disappeared. Before he was taken. There's a difference, Evan. Morrison didn't have an equipment failure. Something down there wanted him, and it got him." Inside the envelope were documents I'd never seen before. Classified reports dated after Project Nautilus was terminated. According to Patricia, she'd obtained them through a contact at NOAA who was asking similar questions about unexplained oceanic phenomena. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a thermal satellite image dated March 1963. 3 weeks after they shut us down, every heat signature we detected went dormant. Complete thermal silence across all 17 sites. Maybe whatever was down there powered down. Or maybe it finished powering up. Patricia's voice was barely above a whisper. "Evan, I think they didn't shut down Project Nautilus because we weren't finding anything. I think they shut it down because we found exactly what they were afraid we'd find." She was right, but I wouldn't understand how right until much later. Date: October 12th, 1969. Location: San Francisco Public Library. 6 years of unemployment had given me ample time to research, and what I discovered made me wish I'd never heard of Project Nautilus. Patricia had been found dead in her apartment 3 months after our coffee shop meeting. The official cause was suicide by overdose, but Patricia had never shown signs of depression, and she'd been meticulously healthy her entire life. Her research materials were missing, though the police report made no mention of a break-in. Her death convinced me that someone was systematically eliminating former Project Nautilus personnel. I began living under assumed names, paying cash for everything, and avoiding any contact with my former life. Sarah had divorced me 2 years earlier, citing my paranoid behaviour and refusal to discuss my government work. I couldn't blame her, but I couldn't stop investigating either. The breakthrough came when I gained access to the library's microfilm archives. Using contacts from my university days, I'd managed to obtain partial access codes for NOAA and NASA's declassified research databases. What I found there changed everything I thought I knew about our planet's history. The files were scattered across different agencies and classification levels, but when assembled, they told a coherent and terrifying story. In 1962, 1 year before Project Nautilus was terminated, an unmanned deep-sea probe had been sent to investigate the thermal anomalies we'd detected. The probe, designated Deep Eye 7, was equipped with the most advanced cameras and sensors available, capable of operating at depths exceeding 15,000 metres. Deep Eye 7 reached the bottom of the Mariana Trench on September 15, 1962. For 6 hours, it transmitted normal operational data, water temperature, pressure readings, geological samples. Then, at 13,247 metres depth, it encountered something that changed the course of human history. The final transmission from Deep Eye 7 lasted 37 seconds. I found the transcript buried in a sub-basement archive that officially didn't exist. Deep Eye 7, final transmission. Date September 15th, 1962. Time 14:27:33 GMT depth, 13,247 metres. Static. Control. This is Deep Eye. I'm seeing... Wait, there's something down here. Something big. Pause. 4 seconds. Control, are you getting this video feed? The entire seafloor is... It's not seafloor. It's a surface. Artificial. Covered in those hexagonal patterns we've been tracking. Pause. 7 seconds. Oh God. Oh Jesus Christ. Control. There's an eye. There's an eye in the ocean floor and it's looking at me. It's the size of a building and it's looking right at... Signal terminated. The file was marked with a classification I'd never seen before. CFR. Classified for religious reasons. Attached to the transcript was a single photograph, grainy and overexposed, but unmistakably showing the ocean floor at crushing depth. In the centre of the image was a circular structure approximately 200 metres in diameter. The structure's surface was smooth, almost organic, and divided into segments like the iris of a massive eye. But it wasn't the size that made my hands shake as I examined the photograph. It was the intelligence behind it, an awareness so ancient and vast that it made humanity look like insects scurrying across the surface of something beyond our comprehension. I spent weeks researching the CFR classification, eventually discovering that it had been created specifically for Project Nautilus findings. According to a memo I found buried in the Vatican Scientific Archives, representatives from major world religions had been consulted about our discoveries in 1962. Their unanimous recommendation was immediate and permanent suppression of all related research. The memo, signed by officials from Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism and Hinduism, stated that the deep-sea discoveries represented theological challenges that could undermine the fundamental spiritual frameworks upon which human civilization depends. But the most disturbing discovery came when I cross-referenced our sonar maps with historical and mythological texts. The locations of our thermal anomalies corresponded exactly with the legendary resting places of ancient sea monsters described in cultures across the world. The Mariana Trench aligned with Babylonian accounts of Tiamat, the primordial chaos monster of the deep. The Tonga Trench matched Polynesian legends of Tangaroa's sleeping guardians. The Puerto Rico Trench corresponded to pre-Columbian accounts of Xipactli, the earth crocodile that dwelled at the bottom of the world. These weren't metaphors or mythological abstractions, they were maps. Ancient civilizations had known about the entities in the deep ocean, and had developed elaborate religious and cultural systems to ensure they remained undisturbed. The taboos against deep-sea exploration, the fear of the ocean's depths, the universal human terror of dark water. These weren't superstitions. They were survival instincts. I found records of other expeditions that had encountered similar phenomena. In 1847, the British Royal Navy had lost contact with HMS Erebus during an Arctic expedition. The final transmission, according to classified Admiralty records I found in London, described great eyes beneath the ice watching from depths that have no bottom. A French bathysphere expedition in 1934 had reported geometric structures of impossible size at the bottom of the Mediterranean before radio contact was lost. The crew was never recovered, but local fishermen reported strange lights rising from deep water for months afterward. Even the famous Titanic disaster showed signs of something more sinister than an iceberg collision. According to testimony from survivors that was excluded from official inquiries, passengers reported seeing lights moving beneath the ship in the moments before impact. The pattern was clear. Humanity had been encountering these entities for centuries, but we'd always been smart enough, or lucky enough, to retreat before awakening something that was better left sleeping, until Project Nautilus. Date: March 3rd, 1973. Location withheld. I made the decision to go public on a cold Tuesday morning after reading about another unexplained deep-sea incident in the newspaper. A Soviet research vessel had vanished in the Kuriel Trench, with the last transmission reporting massive bioluminescent phenomena at maximum depth. The pattern was escalating. Every few months, another deep-sea expedition would encounter something that defied explanation. The official responses were always the same: equipment failure, human error, natural phenomena. But the incidents were becoming too frequent, too consistent, and too terrifying to dismiss. I contacted Dr. William Hartmann, a respected marine biologist at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and arranged to meet him at his laboratory. Hartmann had published papers questioning the official explanations for various oceanic anomalies, making him sympathetic to alternative theories. Dr. Hartley, Hartmann said as he reviewed my materials, if even half of what you're telling me is true, this represents the most significant discovery in human history. It's all true. Every photograph, every recording, every document. I've spent 11 years verifying these findings. Hartmann studied the thermal satellite images with growing amazement. These energy signatures, they're not geological. The power requirements alone would exceed anything natural. What do you think they are? I think they're living entities, ancient, intelligent, and vast beyond our comprehension. I think they've been dormant on the ocean floor for millennia, and our deep-sea exploration has begun to wake them up. That's... Hartmann paused, considering the implications. That's terrifying. It gets worse. I believe the government has known about these entities since at least 1962. They shut down oceanic research not because they found nothing, but because they found something so threatening that it forced them to redirect humanity's entire exploration focus towards space. I showed Hartmann the classified documents, the acoustic recordings, the photographs from Deep Ice 7. With each piece of evidence, his expression grew more troubled. "We need to publish this," he said finally. "The scientific community deserves to know." "I've tried. Every major journal has rejected my submissions without review. Publishers won't return my calls. Academic conferences refuse my presentation proposals. There's been a systematic campaign to discredit and silence me." Hartmann was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want from me?" "Help me get this information out. You have credibility, connections, a platform. People will listen to you. And if they try to silence me too, then at least we'll know I'm not paranoid." Hartmann agreed to help, but our collaboration was short-lived. 3 days after our meeting, he called me in a panic. "They've been here," he said, his voice shaking. "Men in suits, government credentials. They confiscated all the materials you gave me and threatened to revoke my research funding if I continue investigating this." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing." "But Evan, they knew details about our conversation that they shouldn't have known. They're monitoring everything, phones, mail, probably this call too." That was the last time I spoke to Dr. Hartmann. His subsequent research focused exclusively on conventional marine biology. and he never again published anything that questioned official explanations for oceanic phenomena. I realised then that going public through traditional channels was impossible. The conspiracy to suppress information about the deep-sea entities extended throughout the scientific establishment, the government, and possibly beyond. Any attempt to reveal the truth would be met with career destruction, personal discrediting, or worse. But I had to try something. I began writing anonymous letters to newspaper editors, magazine publishers, and television producers, sending them copies of the most compelling evidence without identifying myself. The response was always the same. No interest, no follow-up, no investigation. It was as if the entire media apparatus had been programmed to ignore anything related to deep-sea anomalies. My final attempt at revelation came in 1974, when I managed to schedule a meeting with Bob Woodward of the Washington Post. Woodward had just finished breaking the Watergate story and seemed like someone who might be interested in government cover-ups. We met at a restaurant in Georgetown, and I presented him with a condensed version of my findings. Woodward listened intently, asked intelligent questions, and seemed genuinely intrigued by the implications. "This is extraordinary," he said, reviewing the photographs from Deep Ice 7. "If authentic, this represents a cover-up that makes Watergate look like a parking ticket. It's authentic. I can provide documentation, witness testimony, even the locations where you can verify some of these findings. What do you want me to do with this?" "Investigate. Use your resources, your connections. Find other people who are involved in these projects and get them to talk." Woodward promised to look into the story, but I never heard from him again. When I called the Post a month later, his secretary told me he was no longer taking calls about that ocean thing. I later learned that the Post had received visits from federal agents shortly after our meeting. The official explanation was a routine security review related to Woodward's Watergate sources, but the timing was too convenient to be coincidental. That's when I realised the scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just a government cover-up, it was a coordinated effort involving multiple agencies, international governments, religious organisations, and media outlets. The suppression of information about the deep-sea entities was the most successful conspiracy in human history, and I was completely alone in fighting it. Date: December 31st, 1979. Location withheld. This will be my final entry in this log. Tomorrow I'm going into hiding permanently, destroying my remaining research materials and attempting to disappear entirely from public records. The forces arrayed against me have grown too powerful, too persistent, and too dangerous to continue this investigation. But before I vanish, I need to leave a warning for anyone who might discover this account in the future. 3 weeks ago, I was approached by someone claiming to be a former colleague from Project Nautilus. The man identified himself as Dr. Richard Kellerman, though I had no memory of anyone by that name working on the project. He said he had new information about the entities we'd discovered and suggested we meet at a secluded location to discuss it. Against my better judgment, I agreed to the meeting. Dr. Kellerman met me at a rest stop along Highway 101, far from any populated areas. He was a thin, nervous man in his 50s, with the kind of haunted expression I'd learned to recognise in people who'd seen too much of the ocean's secrets. "Dr. Hartley," he said as we walked away from the parking area, "I've been following your research for years. What you've discovered about the deep-sea entities is important, but it's also incomplete." "What do you mean? You think they're sleeping, waiting to be awakened by human exploration? But that's not correct. They're already awake. They've been awake for decades. What we found down there in the 60s wasn't the beginning of their activity. It was the end of their patience." Kellerman handed me a folder containing documents I'd never seen before. According to the papers, classified monitoring stations had been detecting increased activity from the deep-sea entities since 1965. The rhythmic pulses we'd recorded were accelerating, the thermal signatures were growing stronger, and new acoustic patterns had emerged that suggested coordinated behaviour across multiple sites. "They're not just awakening," Kellerman continued. "They're communicating, organising, preparing for something." The most disturbing document in the folder was a projection analysis dated 1978. Based on the accelerating pattern of activity, Government scientists estimated that the entities would reach full activation threshold sometime in the early 21st century. What happens then? I asked. We don't know, but the analysis suggests it won't be compatible with continued human civilization. Kellerman explained that the government's response had evolved from suppression to preparation. While publicly denying the existence of the deep-sea entities, they'd been secretly developing contingency plans for what they called Event Leviathan, the moment when the entities would emerge from their oceanic domain. Space exploration wasn't just a distraction from oceanic research, Kellerman said. It was preparation for evacuation. If the entities become active, Earth may no longer be habitable for humanity. I realised then why NASA had shifted so dramatically from ocean to space exploration. They weren't running toward the stars, they were running away from the depths. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because someone needs to know. Someone outside the official channels needs to understand what's coming. Kellerman left me with the documents and a final warning. Stop your public investigations. They've been tolerating your research because you're working alone and no one believes you. But if you get too close to the truth, if you start convincing people, they'll stop tolerating you. Who will? Everyone. The government, the military, the religious organisations, even the entities themselves. You think they don't know about your research? You think they can't reach beyond the ocean when they choose to? 3 days after my meeting with Kellerman, I woke up to find my apartment ransacked. Nothing had been stolen, but every piece of research material had been carefully examined and returned to precisely the wrong locations. It was a message. We know what you know, and we can reach you anywhere. That same week, I began experiencing the dreams. Every night I found myself standing on the deck of a ship in the middle of a dark ocean. The water around the vessel was perfectly calm, but beneath the surface I could see lights moving, vast geometric patterns that pulsed with the same rhythm we'd detected 30 years earlier in the Mariana Trench. In the dreams I could hear Morrison's voice, carried on wind that tasted of salt and pressure. It's not dead, Dr. Hartley, it's dreaming, and now it's dreaming of you. The dreams were so vivid, so consistent, that I began to wonder if they were actually dreams at all. Perhaps the entities had developed the ability to project themselves into human consciousness, to monitor and influence anyone who knew too much about their existence. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating regularly. I started seeing shadows moving beneath the surface of every body of water I encountered. Swimming pools, bathtubs, even glasses of drinking water. The ocean had followed me inland and there was nowhere left to hide. That's when I made the decision to end this investigation and disappear entirely from public life. But first, I needed to leave this record for anyone who might continue the search for truth after I'm gone. To whoever finds this log, the entities in the deep ocean are real, they are ancient, and they are preparing for something that will change the course of human history. The government knows about them, and has been preparing for their emergence for decades. Our species' sudden focus on space exploration, our development of advanced aerospace technology, our dreams of colonizing other planets, these aren't signs of human ambition. They're signs of species-level survival instinct. The ocean covers more than 70% of our planet's surface. We've explored less than 5% of its depths. In that unexplored darkness, something vast and intelligent has been waiting, since before human civilization began. They stopped exploring the ocean not because there was nothing to find, but because they found something we were never meant to awaken. And now it's too late to put it back to sleep. If you're reading this in the 21st century, pay attention to the signs. Watch for unexplained oceanic phenomena. Listen for reports of deep-sea mining operations encountering technical difficulties. Notice how quickly such stories disappear from the news cycle. Most importantly, if you ever hear about rhythmic pulses detected in the deep ocean, if you see reports of massive bioluminescent displays in the abyss, if you witness water boiling from the depths without explanation, know that the countdown has begun. The sea didn't hide monsters, it preserved them, and now they're ready to reclaim what was always theirs. Dr. Evan Hartley. December 31st, 1979, final entry. TikTok post, user @DeepSeaExplorer, 2025, posted June 14th, 2025, views, 847,392. Caption: Guys, something insane is happening off the coast of Guam. The water is literally boiling and there's this sound. Ocean mystery. Deep sea gas unexplained. Video shows churning ocean water with steam rising from the surface. In the background, a low rhythmic pulse can be heard. Lub-dub, 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 growing stronger with each beat. The video ends abruptly as the phone's camera lens cracks, though no impact is visible. NOAA press release. June 15th, 2025 for immediate release. Geological survey reports minor seismic activity near Guam. Honolulu HI. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reports that recent unusual water conditions observed near Guam are the result of minor underwater volcanic activity. Citizens are advised that the phenomena pose no threat to public safety. The rhythmic audio phenomena reported in social media posts are consistent with natural geological processes and should not be cause for concern. NOAA continues to monitor the situation and will provide updates as necessary. For more information, contact the NOAA press office at text message thread, June 15th, 2025. Contact Sarah Hartley Morrison. Sarah: Did you see the news about Guam? Sarah: The water thing? Sarah: It's exactly what Evan used to talk about. Sarah: Before he disappeared. Sarah: The sounds are the same. Sarah: Oh God, what if he was right? Sarah: What if he was right about everything? Message failed to deliver. Contact unavailable. This number has been disconnected. Internal memo. Classification level: black. From Director of Operations to all department heads. Date: June 15th, 2025. Subject: Event Leviathan, Phase 1. Activation. Effective immediately, all personnel are to report to designated deep bunker facilities. Surface operations are suspended until further notice. The entities have achieved critical mass activation. Preliminary estimates suggest coordinated emergence within 72 hours. Space evacuation protocols are now in effect. Priority personnel will be transferred to orbital stations beginning 0600 hours. May God help us all. Final entry, found in Dr. Evan Hartley's abandoned research facility. Date: June 16th, 2025. Written in an unknown hand. They found me. After 46 years of hiding, they found me. Not the government, not the military. Them. I'm writing this as the water rises around my cabin. Though the nearest ocean is 300 miles away, the water is warm, and it glows with that familiar hexagonal pattern I first saw in 1959. Morrison was right. It's not dead. It's been dreaming. And now it's awake. The dreams I've been having for decades weren't dreams at all. They were memories. The memories of something so ancient that it remembers when the ocean was young. It's been watching us, learning from us, waiting for us to develop the technology it needs. Space exploration, satellite networks, global communications. We thought we were advancing as a species. We were building the tools for our own replacement. The entities don't want to destroy humanity. They want to absorb us, to add our knowledge, our creativity, our consciousness to their own vast intelligence. The ocean was never their prison. It was their nursery. And now they're ready to graduate. The water is at my ankles now. I can feel it calling to me, the same way it called to Morrison all those years ago. The pressure should be crushing me, but instead I feel peaceful. Like I'm finally coming home. I understand now why they shut down Project Nautilus. Not to hide the truth from humanity, but to give us time. Time to develop, to grow, to become worthy of joining something larger than ourselves. The ocean is rising, not just here, but everywhere. The reports are coming in from around the world. Coastal cities flooding, though the weather is clear. The water is glowing, and it's bringing them with it. By the time anyone reads this, it will be too late to stop what's coming. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe we've been looking at this all wrong. Maybe we're not the victims of an alien invasion. Maybe we're the children, finally being called home. The water is at my chest now. I can see lights moving beneath the surface, not hostile, but welcoming, like the lights of a city seen from a great distance. I'm not afraid anymore. After 50 years of running, of hiding, of trying to warn people who wouldn't listen, I'm finally ready to stop. To whoever finds this, don't fight them. Don't fear them. They've been waiting for us longer than our species has existed. We were never meant to stay on the surface forever. The abyss was never empty. It was just waiting for us to be ready to fill it. The water is over my head now, but I can still breathe. I can still see, and I can hear them calling my name. And it's time to go home. It's time to go down. It's time to return to the deep. Hello there, fellow seekers of hidden truths. Before we dive into tonight's tale, I hope your day has been treating you well, whether it's morning coffee where you are, an afternoon break, or you're settling in for the evening like so many of our listeners around the globe, from Tokyo to London, Sao Paulo to Sydney. Welcome to Sleep Theories. If this is your first time joining us, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the shadows that powerful people prefer to keep hidden. And now, let's descend into the redwoods of Northern California, where ancient trees witness modern horrors. Recovered journal entry, classification redacted. Subject, Eli Granger, independent journalist. Date range, July 15th to 18th, 2023. Location, Bohemian Grove, Monte Rio, California. The following document was recovered from an encrypted server farm in Iceland. The journalist's current whereabouts remain unknown. Ed. My name is Eli Granger, and I'm writing this because I may not live long enough to tell it in person. What I witnessed in the redwoods of Northern California will haunt me until my dying day, whenever that may come. It started 3 weeks ago with an email that shouldn't have existed. I was in my cramped Oakland apartment, nursing my third cup of coffee, and scrolling through encrypted channels where whistleblowers sometimes surface. My secure inbox pinged. A message from an address that was just a string of numbers and letters, routed through 7 different proxy servers. No subject line, just an attachment and 4 lines of text. You want truth? Go to the redwoods. Bring a black suit and a quiet soul. July 15th to 18th. The fire reveals all. The attachment was a high-resolution scan of what appeared to be a guest registry for the Bohemian Grove, that mysterious all-male retreat where the world's most powerful men allegedly gather each summer to commune with nature. I'd written about the Grove before, relying on second-hand accounts and leaked photographs from the 1980s, but this was different. The names on the list made my blood run cold. Former presidents, current senators, military contractors whose companies I'd been investigating for years, CEOs of tech giants, pharmaceutical corporations, defense contractors, media moguls who controlled the narrative of entire nations, all scheduled to attend something called the Midsummer Encampment. At the bottom of the scan was a forged access pass with my photograph, a professional headshot I'd never sent to anyone, digitally altered to show me in a black suit and tie. The name read Edmund Gray, Logistics Consultant, Prometheus Industries. Someone with serious resources wanted me inside that grove. The question was why? I should have walked away. Should have deleted the email and gone back to writing about municipal corruption and corporate tax avoidance. Safe stories. Stories that didn't get journalists killed. Instead, I packed a black suit and drove north to Sonoma County. The road to Monte Rio winds through some of the most beautiful country in California. Ancient redwoods tower over narrow highways, their canopy so thick that midday feels like twilight. It's the kind of place where you'd expect to find hippie communes and organic wineries, not shadowy cabals plotting the fate of nations. But as I learned in my Navy intelligence days, the most dangerous secrets are always hidden in the most innocent places. I parked at a motel in Gurneville and walked the perimeter of the Bohemian Grove property that evening. 2,000 acres of private forest, surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Security cameras every 50 feet, motion sensors in the trees, the kind of setup you'd expect around a military installation, not a summer camp for rich men. The main gate was staffed by guards who looked more like special forces operators than private security. Black uniforms, tactical gear, the flat stare of men who'd killed before and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. Whatever happened inside those redwoods, they were serious about keeping it secret. The forged pass worked perfectly, too perfectly. The guards scanned the barcode, checked my face against the photo, and waved me through without a second glance. Either the forger was a genius, or someone very powerful wanted me inside. Neither possibility was comforting. The grove itself was exactly as described in the leaked accounts I'd read. Massive redwood trees, some over 1,000 years old, stretched toward a canopy so thick it blocked out the sun. Gravel paths wound between rustic cabins and open-air lodges, each marked with whimsical names: Owl's Nest, Dragon's Den, Caveman's Lodge. It would have been charming if not for the underlying sense of wrongness that permeated everything. The other guests, I couldn't think of them as normal people, not after seeing that registry, moved through this camp with the easy confidence of men accustomed to absolute power. They wore casual clothes during the day, khakis, polo shirts, boat shoes, the uniform of American aristocracy. But their conversations, caught in fragments as I passed, revealed the true scope of their influence. The Shanghai Index will drop exactly 17%. Tell the secretary that Operation Nightfall is greenlit for October. Media blackout should hold for at least 72 hours. I posed as a logistics consultant, which gave me an excuse to wander the grounds with a clipboard and camera phone, confiscated at the gate and replaced with an approved device that couldn't access external networks. The cover story worked well enough. Rich men are accustomed to being served by invisible people who handle the mundane details of their lives. But as the day wore on, I began to notice the symbols. Owls everywhere, carved into tree trunks, etched on building facades, worked into the designs of benches and lampposts. Not cute, friendly owls. These were stylized, angular, with eyes that seemed to follow you as you walked past. The largest was a 40-foot stone statue positioned on a small island in an artificial lake at the heart of the grove. Even in daylight, it radiated a sense of ancient malevolence. Beautiful, isn't it? I turned to find a man in his 70s watching me stare at the giant owl. Silver hair, expensive casual wear, the kind of artificial tan that comes from winters in Palm Beach. His eyes were the palest blue I'd ever seen, almost colourless. The Owl of Bohemia, he continued, joining me at the lake's edge. Been watching over this place for over a century. Some say it's just decorative, others know better. Know better how? I asked, immediately regretting the question. I was supposed to be invisible, unremarkable. The old man smiled, revealing teeth too white and too perfect for his age. You'll see tonight, Mr. Grey. The cremation of care waits for no man, not even consultants. He walked away before I could respond, leaving me staring at the owl statue and wondering how much my cover had already been blown. That evening, as twilight settled over the grove, the atmosphere changed completely. The casual bonhomie of the day disappeared, replaced by something far more serious and ritualistic. Men emerged from their cabins wearing dark robes with hoods that obscured their faces. Some carried torches, others strange ceremonial objects I couldn't identify. I found a dark robe hanging in my assigned cabin, along with a note. Attendance is mandatory. Silence is sacred. The owl sees all. What I witnessed that night will stay with me forever. As darkness fell, hundreds of robed figures processed through the forest paths, converging on the lake where the great owl statue loomed. Torches flickered between the trees like malevolent fireflies. The only sounds were footsteps on gravel and the whisper of fabric against bark. I followed the crowd, keeping my head down and my hood up. The robes smelled of incense and something else, something organic and unpleasant that I couldn't identify. We gathered in a natural amphitheatre around the lake. The owl statue dominated the scene, its eyes seeming to glow red in the torchlight. A wooden boat had been prepared at the water's edge, and in it lay what appeared to be the effigy of a child, small, wrapped in white cloth, disturbingly lifelike. But as I stared at the bundle, a horrible doubt crept into my mind. The proportions were too perfect, the weight distribution too natural. The way the cloth clung to what lay beneath suggested something more substantial than straw and sawdust. A figure in an elaborate robe stepped onto a platform beside the owl. Even with his face hidden, I recognised the bearing and voice of a man who'd been on television every night for years. A former president whose policies had shaped a generation. Brothers of the Grove, his voice boomed across the water, amplified by hidden speakers. We gather once again beneath the ancient eyes of wisdom to perform the sacred rite that frees us from the burdens of conscience. The crowd responded in unison. We banish care and cast it to the flames. Care, that pale and common thing that binds the hands of power. Care that whispers doubt in the ears of decision. Care that stays the sword of necessary action. We banish care and cast it to the flames. The ritualized call and response continued for nearly an hour. Invocations to ancient deities whose names I recognized from my study of Middle Eastern mythology. Moloch, the Carthaginian god of child sacrifice. Enlil, the Mesopotamian lord of wind and authority. Names that shouldn't have been spoken by American leaders in the 21st century. But the most disturbing element wasn't the pagan imagery, or even the suggestions of child sacrifice. It was the casual way these men, titans of industry, shapers of policy, guardians of democracy, participated in rituals that explicitly celebrated the abandonment of human compassion. The ceremony reached its climax when the boat carrying the effigy was pushed out onto the lake. Flames erupted from the water around it, hidden gas jets, I realised, creating the illusion of supernatural fire. The figure in the boat burned quickly, the white cloth falling away to reveal... I still can't be certain what I saw. In the flickering light, with smoke obscuring my vision and my mind reeling from the horror of it all, it might have been an elaborately constructed mannequin. The realistic movement could have been caused by the flames consuming internal supports. The sounds, brief, high-pitched, quickly cut off, might have been air escaping from burning materials. But the way some of the robed figures wept as the fire consumed its offering, the way others cheered with genuine ecstasy, suggested something far more sinister than theatrical pageantry. As the flames died down, the crowd began to disperse. I started to follow them back toward the cabins, but a hand fell on my shoulder. Mr. Grey. It was the old man from earlier, still wearing his ceremonial robes. You're invited to the inner circle gathering. A rare honour for a consultant. Before I could refuse, two other figures flanked me. Not threatening exactly, but their presence made it clear that declining wasn't an option. They led me deeper into the forest, away from the main paths, to a clearing I hadn't seen during my earlier reconnaissance. Here, perhaps 30 men stood in a circle around a fire pit carved directly into the bedrock. Unlike the theatrical grandeur of the main ceremony, this felt ancient and deadly serious. The inner circle ritual began at midnight. The participants had exchanged their dark robes for masks of polished bone, owl faces with hollow eye sockets that seemed to bore into your soul. They moved with practiced precision, suggesting this ceremony had been performed countless times before. The man who'd led the earlier ritual stepped into the centre of the circle. Without his presidential bearing and familiar voice, he seemed diminished. Just another acolyte serving powers older than nations. Brothers of the Inner Grove, he intoned, we gather to receive the wisdom of the Ancient Ones, and to consecrate the plans that will shape the world's destiny. The response came in a language I didn't recognise at first, harsh consonants and guttural vowels that seemed to bypass the conscious mind and speak directly to something primal and terrified in the human psyche. But as my Navy intelligence training kicked in, I began to parse familiar elements. This was Akkadian, the ancient language of Mesopotamia, dead for over 2,000 years. They were chanting the names of forgotten gods and promising them sacrifices of nations. Symbols were drawn in the ash around the fire pit, not random occult doodles, but specific sigils I recognised from declassified CIA documents. Project MK-Ultra had experimented with ritualistic programming, using ancient symbols and dead languages to bypass conscious resistance in human subjects. The research had supposedly been discontinued in the 1970s. Apparently it had just moved to a more exclusive venue. The ceremony continued for hours. Maps were produced and spread on the ground, not of geographical territories, but of economic zones, resource deposits, population centres. Plans were discussed in mixture of English and Akkadian, but the intent was clear enough. Wars to be started, governments to be toppled, populations to be controlled. And through it all, the participants spoke of themselves not as American leaders serving American interests, but as servants of the Ancient Ones, preparing the world for some greater transformation. The harvest approaches, one masked figure intoned. The sleepers must be awakened. The old seals must be broken. In the name of those who wait in the deep places, the circle responded, let the work continue. I crouched in the shadows beyond the firelight, recording everything on a digital audio device I'd hidden in my shoe. But as the night wore on, I began to understand that what I was witnessing wasn't just corruption or conspiracy in any conventional sense. These men genuinely believed they were serving inhuman masters. Whether those masters were real or imagined didn't matter. The policies they were planning would affect millions of lives based on the whims of entities that viewed humanity as livestock. The ritual concluded with each participant drinking from a silver chalice and making individual pledges. The liquid looked black in the firelight, and several men convulsed briefly after drinking, their eyes rolling back to show only white. As dawn approached, the circle dissolved. The participants removed their masks, revealed themselves to be exactly who I'd suspected. Former presidents, current senators, military leaders, corporate titans. They shook hands and exchanged quiet words like businessmen concluding a profitable meeting, which in a sense they were. I made it back to my cabin as the first light filtered through the redwood canopy, but I knew I couldn't stay much longer. Whatever protection my forged identity provided was wearing thin. Too many meaningful looks, too many knowing smiles. They were playing with me, letting me see just enough to understand the scope of what I'd stumbled into. But there was one more place I needed to investigate before I could flee. The lodge marked Styx, access by code only, sat apart from the main camp, connected by a service road that didn't appear on any of the maps provided to guests. I'd noticed it during my first day's reconnaissance, but hadn't found an opportunity to investigate. The building itself was unremarkable. Standard wooden construction that matched the other lodges, designed to blend into the forest environment. But the security was anything but standard. Biometric scanners, electromagnetic locks, motion sensors that could detect a heartbeat from 50 feet away. Fortunately, my anonymous benefactor had provided more than just a forged access pass. Hidden in the lining of my suit jacket was a USB device that looked like a standard thumb drive, but contained sophisticated hacking tools developed by someone with serious technical skills. When plugged into the lodge's security system, it created a temporary blind spot in the sensors and provided the access codes needed to bypass the locks. Whoever wanted me to see what lay inside had planned this infiltration down to the smallest detail. The lodge's interior was a facade. Behind a false wall accessed by yet another hidden panel, stairs led down into the bedrock beneath the forest. The passage was older than the buildings above, carved stone rather than modern construction, lit by electric fixtures that had been retrofitted into ancient sconces. At the bottom of the stairs, a heavy oak door opened onto a chamber that took my breath away. The room stretched far beyond what should have been possible given the lodge's footprint above. Stone shelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound journals, rolled documents, and artefacts that seemed to span centuries. At the centre of the chamber stood a massive table carved from a single piece of black stone, its surface covered with maps, blueprints, and what appeared to be governmental documents bearing official seals. I started with the journals, selecting one at random from a shelf marked 1923 to 1945. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, but the contents were anything but quaint. The European situation proceeds according to plan. Our associates in Berlin understand their role, though they believe themselves to be serving the fatherland rather than the ancient ones. The sacrifice of the lesser peoples will provide the spiritual energy necessary for the next phase of the great work. Another journal, this one more recent. Operation Mockingbird exceeds all expectations. The media outlets respond to our guidance without question, believing they serve journalistic integrity, while actually perpetuating the narratives required for population control. The sleeping masses accept whatever reality we provide. But it was the documents on the central table that truly shattered my understanding of how the world worked. Blueprints for the USA Patriot Act dated 6 months before September 11th, 2001. Battle plans for the invasion of Iraq, complete with fabricated intelligence reports about weapons of mass destruction. Early drafts of social media algorithms designed not to connect people, but to divide them into manageable, controllable factions. And newer documents that made my blood run cold. Plans for a global pandemic response that prioritized control over public health. Blueprints for digital currency systems that would eliminate financial privacy entirely. Population reduction strategies disguised as environmental initiatives. The most disturbing document was a roster of participants going back to the 1870s, when the Bohemian Club was first founded. Names I recognised from history textbooks, titans of the Gilded Age who'd shaped America's industrial development. But also names that shouldn't have been there. Figures from much earlier periods, some dating back centuries. Either the record keeping was fantastically inaccurate, or some of these participants weren't entirely human. At the bottom of the most recent page, a note in fresh handwriting. E. Granger, journalist, witnessed inner circle ceremony. July 16th, 2023. Asset or liability. Recommend termination if no compliance by dawn July 18th. They knew exactly who I was, had known from the moment I'd walked through their gates, the anonymous email, the forged pass, the convenient access codes. It had all been an elaborate test, and I was apparently failing. A motion sensor somewhere in the chamber beeped softly. Red lights began flashing along the walls. In the distance I could hear the sound of heavy footsteps descending the stone stairs. I grabbed as many documents as I could carry, stuffed them into my jacket and looked for another way out. But there was only one exit, and it was about to be filled with very unfriendly people. The footsteps were getting closer. Voices echoed down the stairwell, professional, clipped, the kind of tactical communication used by military operators. But then the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in hellish red. And in that brief moment of darkness, I heard something that shouldn't have been possible. A voice speaking directly into my mind, words that bypassed my ears entirely. Run, little journalist. Run and tell the world what you've seen. But know that the telling will be your doom, and the world's salvation requires far greater sacrifices than one man's life. When the emergency light stabilised, a section of the stone wall had opened, revealing a narrow tunnel that led deeper into the earth. I didn't hesitate. Whatever entity had just spoken to me, whether it was one of the ancient ones or something else entirely, it was offering me a chance to escape. I took it. The tunnel system beneath the grove was extensive and clearly ancient. Carved passages connected natural caves, creating a network that probably extended for miles underground. The walls were covered with symbols similar to those I'd seen during the inner circle ceremony, but these were older, deeper, worn smooth by centuries of whatever had moved through these spaces. I followed the main passage for what felt like hours, guided by phosphorescent moss that provided just enough light to avoid the worst obstacles. Behind me, I could hear sounds of pursuit, voices, flashlight beams, the occasional echo of radio communication. But the sounds were growing fainter, suggesting that my pursuers either couldn't find the tunnel entrance or were reluctant to follow me into the deep places beneath the forest. Eventually the passage began to slope upward. Fresh air carried the scent of rain and growing things. A natural opening concealed by hanging vines led out into the forest several miles from the main grove compound. I emerged to find the sky filled with storm clouds. Thunder rumbled overhead, and the first fat raindrops were beginning to fall. Perfect cover for an escape, if I could make it to my car before the Grove's security forces expanded their search perimeter. But as I made my way through the forest, I realised I wasn't alone. Figures moved between the trees, not the tactical teams I'd expected, but something far stranger. They wore the bone-white owl masks from the inner circle ceremony, but their movements were wrong, too fluid, too precise. And their eyes glowed with a faint bioluminescence that had nothing to do with reflected light. "The journalist sees too much," one of them said, the words somehow audible despite the increasing thunder. "The Ancient Ones are displeased." "But the compact must be honoured," another replied. "He was brought here for a purpose. Let him carry the message to the outer world. Let them know what awaits." I ran. Behind me, inhuman laughter echoed through the forest. Not pursuit exactly, but something far more unsettling. The sound of predators who were confident their prey could never truly escape. I reached my rental car as the storm broke in earnest. Rain pounded the windshield as I drove through the night, taking back roads and avoiding the main highways. In my jacket pocket, the stolen documents felt like they were burning against my chest. But I'd made it out. I had evidence. I had proof of the conspiracy that shaped world events from the shadows of a California forest. Or so I thought. I uploaded everything to an offshore server farm in Iceland. Documents, audio recordings, photographs, detailed notes of everything I'd witnessed. Multiple backup copies, distributed through anonymous networks, protected by military-grade encryption. Within 6 hours, every file had been corrupted or deleted. My apartment was ransacked while I was at an internet cafe, uploading the files. Nothing obviously stolen, but every electronic device had been confiscated or destroyed. My laptop, phone, backup drives, even the digital camera I'd left in a drawer, all gone. The mainstream media ignored my story completely. Alternative news sites that initially showed interest suddenly went silent. Forum posts about the Grove were deleted within minutes of being posted. It was as if the entire internet had been scrubbed of any reference to what I'd discovered. But the worst part was the dreams. Every night since my escape, I've been visited by visions of the Ancient Ones. Vast, tentacled entities that exist in spaces between dimensions, feeding on human suffering and preparing for some cosmic transformation that will remake reality according to their twisted desires. They show me glimpses of the future they're working to create. Cities drowned beneath black oceans, skies filled with screaming winds, populations reduced to cattle serving inhuman masters. And they whisper that I'm not a hero or a journalist or even a victim. I'm a messenger. They wanted someone to witness their ceremony, to understand the scope of their power, to carry word of their inevitable victory to the outside world. Not to warn humanity, warnings imply the possibility of resistance, but to spread the despair that will make their final conquest easier. Every word I write, every person I tell, every attempt to expose the truth only serves their greater purpose. The corruption of hope, the murder of faith in human institutions, the slow transformation of free people into willing slaves. I'm writing this final entry from a motel room in Reno. I've been driving for 3 days, never staying in one place for more than a few hours. But I know it doesn't matter. They're not hunting me because they don't need to. I'm already serving their purpose just by existing, just by remembering what I saw in the Grove. The cremation of care wasn't just a ritual, it was a recruitment ceremony. And I wasn't an infiltrator, I was an initiate. Tonight, I'll drive east toward the desert. Maybe I'll find some way to break the cycle, to turn their own trap against them. Or maybe I'll just disappear into the wasteland and let the truth die with me. But if you're reading this, if somehow these words have reached you despite all their efforts to control the flow of information, then remember this. They call it the cremation of care, but what they really burn is conscience. And when the fires die down, the world grows a little colder, a little darker, a little more ready for the Ancient Ones to reclaim what they consider their rightful dominion. The fire in the Grove never really goes out. It just spreads, invisible and inexorable, consuming everything human until only the shadows remain. And in those shadows something very old and very hungry is waiting to be born. Hello, night wanderers and digital truth seekers. Before we dive into tonight's story, I hope your day treated you well. What time is it where you are right now? Are you listening from a bustling city, a quiet suburb, or perhaps somewhere far off the grid? Wherever you are in this connected yet disconnected world, you've found your way to Sleep Theories, the place where we explore the stories that keep us awake at night. If this tale resonates with you, or if you simply enjoy having your reality questioned at 2 a.m, consider subscribing. We're building a community of those who dare to look behind the digital curtain. Now, settle in. Tonight's story is about 4 people who discovered something they were never meant to find. The retired military satellite KH-14B hadn't been active for 3 years. Officially decommissioned after budget cuts forced the Pentagon to consolidate their orbital surveillance network. So when Nova Chen's custom frequency scanner picked up an encrypted data burst routing through its dormant transponder at 3:47 a.m, she knew someone was playing with fire. "Lynx, you need to see this," she calls across the converted warehouse that serves as their operations centre. The space looks like a digital graveyard. Servers humming in stacks, screens casting blue light across walls covered in network diagrams and corporate org charts connected by red string. Welcome to the underground. Lynx Rodriguez slides his chair over, steam rising from his 4th cup of coffee. At 32, his face carries the weight of someone who's seen the machinery of power from the inside. Former NSA turned whistleblower turned ghost. What's the signature? Military-grade encryption, but it's using deprecated protocols. Whoever sent this wanted it to look old, forgotten. Nova's fingers dance across 3 keyboards simultaneously. But the timestamp is fresh. Someone's using dead satellites to hide active communications. Jax looks up from their corner workstation, purple hair catching the monitor glow. How fresh! 15 minutes ago. The warehouse falls silent except for the eternal hum of cooling fans. Professor Kale emerges from the makeshift lab in the back corner, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. At 58, he's the oldest member of their group, a disgraced virologist whose career ended when he asked too many questions about certain pandemic-era research protocols. "Did you crack it?" Kale asks, approaching with the careful steps of someone who's learned to expect bad news. Nova's screen fills with cascading code as her decryption algorithms chew through layers of obfuscation. Almost. There. The file materializes. Project Aegis 2030.enx. Aegis, Lynx mutters. That's not good. Aegis was a classified program I remember from my NSA days. Theoretical population management scenarios. Theoretical, Nova repeats, clicking open the file. Let's see how theoretical it still is. The document unfolds across her screen like a digital autopsy report. Code fragments, data tables, implementation timelines. Her eyes scan the contents, and her expression shifts from curiosity to confusion to something approaching horror. "Guys," she says, her voice dropping to a whisper, "this isn't about surveillance, this isn't about control." Jack spins their chair around. "What is it about?" Nova's hands tremble slightly as she highlights a section of code. Variables with names like fertility, reduction, vectors, genetic selection, protocols, and population ceiling enforcement. "It's about extinction," she breathes. "Mass vaccination campaigns, supply chain disruptions, climate-based selection zones." She reads directly from the screen. Phase implementation. Reduce global population to sustainable levels through coordinated biological and environmental interventions. Target timeline 2030. Acceptable retention rate 6 to 8% of current population. The silence stretches like a held breath. 6 to 8%, Kyle repeats slowly, of 7 billion people. "That's not population control," Lynx says, his intelligence training kicking in as he processes the implications. "That's genocide with a spreadsheet." Nova scrolls deeper into the document, her face pale in the monitor light. "There's more. Listen to this. This initiative represents a fundamental reset of the human species. Traditional methods of population management through war, famine, and disease have proven insufficient to address the accelerating resource depletion crisis. Project Aegis represents a coordinated approach to ensure species survival through selective reduction." "Species survival?" Jax echoes. "They're talking about us like we're livestock." "No," Nova corrects, her voice hollow. "Livestock are valuable. We're weeds they want to clear from the garden." Kale sits down heavily, his scientific mind wrestling with the implications. During his years researching virology, he'd seen enough classified projects to know that the line between theoretical and operational could be crossed with a single authorization signature. "We need to verify this," he says finally. "Cross-reference with known programs, trace the source, build a complete picture. If this is real," Nova finishes, "we're looking at the greatest crime in human history, and it's already begun." Lynx pulls up his contacts, a carefully maintained network of sources still embedded in various intelligence agencies. "I'll reach out to my people, see what chatter I can pick up. I'll dig into the technical specifications," Jax offers. "These code fragments reference specific biological agents. If they're using existing research, there'll be traces in academic databases." Nova saves the file to their secure server and begins setting up multiple backup protocols. "Professor, we need you to analyze the biological components. Your expertise might be the key to understanding how they plan to implement this." As the team disperses to their workstations, the weight of their discovery settles over the warehouse like digital smoke. They've stumbled across something that wasn't meant for human eyes, a blueprint for the end of the world as they know it. Outside, the city sleeps on, unaware that 4 people in a converted warehouse have just glimpsed the future, and it looks like a graveyard with Wi-Fi. Nova stares at the file name blinking on her screen, Project Aegis 2030.nc. In mythology, Aegis was the shield of Zeus, a divine protection for the gods. But protection for whom? And protection from what? As she begins her deep dive into the data, one phrase keeps echoing in her mind from the document's executive summary. This isn't about control, it's about resetting the species. The countdown, she realises, isn't to some distant apocalypse. It's to tomorrow. 3 days of sleepless research have transformed their warehouse into a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Every wall now displays interconnected timelines, corporate hierarchies, and data flowcharts that would make a forensic accountant weep. Nova hasn't left the building since they cracked the Aegis file, surviving on instant ramen and the kind of caffeine-fueled determination that borders on religious fervour. "I found the breadcrumbs," she announces, her voice hoarse from exhaustion, and chain-smoking cigarettes she bummed from Lynx. The World Population Summit in Cairo, 1994. Most people remember it as a boring UN conference about reproductive rights and sustainable development. She pulls up archived documents on the main display screen, official transcripts, media reports, diplomatic cables, standard bureaucratic theatre. But look what happens when you dig into the closed-door sessions. A classified document appears, heavily redacted but with enough visible text to tell a story. The header reads, "Adaptive Earth Framework, Preliminary Implementation Strategies." Kale adjusts his glasses, squinting at the screen. "I remember this conference. I was a graduate student then, writing my dissertation on population genetics. There were rumours about private sessions, but nobody talked about what was discussed," Nova finishes. "Except someone did. Deep in the diplomatic archives, buried under 17 layers of classification, I found this." She highlights passages that make the room's temperature seem to drop. Non-essential demographic drift must be addressed through coordinated intervention. Genetic dead zones present opportunity for selective resource allocation. Acceptable fallout parameters established at 85 to 90% reduction over 2-generation cycle. Project requires integration of medical, agricultural and environmental vectors. Jax looks up from their workstation, where they've been cross-referencing pharmaceutical patents. "Nova, you need to see this. Those medical vectors they mention. I've been tracking the patent filings, and there's a pattern." They throw their research onto the shared screen. Dozens of pharmaceutical patents filed between 2018 and 2023, all connected to a web of shell companies, all related to mRNA modification technology. "But here's the weird part," Jax continues. "These patents aren't just for vaccines. They're for genetic modification systems that can be activated remotely, dormant until triggered by specific environmental factors." Kale's face goes pale. That's not possible. The technology to create delayed activation genetic modifications didn't exist in 2018, Jax agrees, but it does now, and according to these patents, it's been deployed. Nova pulls up another document from their Aegis cache. "Remember, Professor, You mentioned seeing strange compounds in vaccine trials during the pandemic. Trials with non-public results. Kale nods slowly. There were inconsistencies. Control groups that should have shown specific immune responses but didn't. Novel proteins that had no apparent therapeutic function. When I raised concerns, you were discredited and forced out, Nova says. They called you a conspiracy theorist. Because I was asking the wrong questions, Kale realises. I was looking for immediate effects, but if these compounds were designed for delayed activation... Link slides his chair over, holding a printout of classified communications he's pulled from the old NSA databases. I've been digging through archived surveillance reports. Remember how during the pandemic, certain rural areas had unusually high vaccination rates, areas that normally resist federal health initiatives. He spreads out a map showing vaccination distribution patterns across the United States. Strange clusters appear in seemingly random locations. Rural counties in Montana, farming communities in Iowa, small towns along the Appalachian Trail. These aren't random, Nova says, studying the pattern. They're systematic. Someone was targeting specific populations. Or specific genetic profiles, Kale adds quietly. Jax's workstation chimes with an alert. Guys, I've been monitoring dark web chatter about unusual health trends. Look at this. They project a series of forum posts, social media reports, and medical anomalies from the past 6 months. Unexplained fertility drops in rural communities. Unusual autoimmune responses in adults aged 25 to 45. Regional variations in birth defects that don't match known environmental factors. Agricultural workers reporting mysterious illnesses that don't respond to standard treatments. Nova connects the dots on their shared display, drawing lines between vaccination sites, health anomalies, and demographic data. The pattern that emerges looks like a slow-motion biological weapon detonating across the landscape. They weren't just treating viruses, she says, echoing Kale's earlier words. They were treating the future human genome. Lynx pulls up another classified document, this one from a more recent surveillance operation. There's more. I found references to something called genetic compatibility mapping in Department of Homeland Security briefings. They've been collecting DNA samples through routine medical procedures and cross-referencing them with... He stops, staring at the screen. With what? Nova prompts. With survival probability models, he finishes. They're not just tracking who might survive their selective reduction. They're actively identifying who they want to eliminate. The warehouse falls silent as the implications settle over them like digital ash. They're not just looking at a conspiracy, they're looking at the implementation phase of humanity's final exam. And most of the class is about to fail. Kale stands up slowly, his scientific mind finally accepting what his moral instincts have been screaming. We need to understand the full scope. If they've weaponized the medical system, the agricultural system, the environmental monitoring system, then they've turned civilization itself into a weapon, Nova completes. As if summoned by their conversation, Jax's monitoring systems light up with alerts. Encrypted traffic spike on the satellite networks, same routing pattern as the original Aegis transmission. Nova rushes to her decryption station. They're talking again. If we can intercept this... The file downloads slowly, each percentage point feeling like an eternity. When it finally opens, it's not code this time. It's a video conference recording. Meeting minutes, Lynx realises, from yesterday. Nova's hand hovers over the play button. Once they watch this, there's no going back. No pretending they stumbled across theoretical documents or academic exercises. Whatever's on this recording, she says, it's going to show us who's behind this, and what comes next. She clicks play. The screen fills with faces they recognise from news broadcasts and magazine covers. World leaders, tech billionaires, pharmaceutical executives, and scientists, all sitting around a virtual conference table discussing the end of the world with the casual tone of a quarterly earnings call. And in the corner of the screen, a countdown timer. 18 months, 14 days, 7 hours, 23 minutes. The clock is ticking, and they're about to learn exactly what happens when it reaches 0. The video quality is surprisingly good for something intercepted from a rerouted satellite signal. Crystal clear audio, HD resolution, perfect lighting. Almost as if whoever recorded this wanted it to be found by someone with the right skills and motivation. Nova adjusts the audio levels as familiar faces fill the screen, She recognises at least half of them. Pharmaceutical CEOs who've been in the news, tech moguls who've testified before Congress, government officials whose names appear in leaked documents weekly. But it's the people she doesn't recognise that worry her more. Faces that suggest power operates in layers the public never sees. "Audio check," a voice says off-screen. "We're recording for the archive. All participants have been verified through biometric confirmation." "Proceed with briefing," responds a woman Nova recognises as the director of the World Health Organization. Phase 3 implementation status. A man in his 60s, distinguished silver hair, appears in a separate window. The nameplate reads, Dr. Harrison Vale, Protean Core Industries. Nova makes a mental note. She's never heard of Protean Core, which means they've done excellent work staying invisible. Phase 3 is proceeding on schedule, Dr. Vale reports. Biometric surveillance systems are now operational in 847 rural zones across 17 countries. Heat mapping, fertility tracking and genetic sequencing capabilities are running at full capacity. Jax pauses their other work to focus on the video. Genetic sequencing? That's not something you can do remotely. Unless, Kale says slowly, you've already collected samples through other means. On screen, Dr. Vale continues. Integration with consumer health devices has exceeded projections. Voluntary data submission through fitness trackers, smartphones, and IoT medical devices now covers 73% of target demographics in developed nations. Nova feels her blood turn cold. She looks at the fitness tracker on her own wrist, a gift from her sister 2 Christmases ago. The little device that's been monitoring her heart rate, sleep patterns, stress levels. The device that connects to her phone, which connects to the cloud, which connects to... Smart device penetration in rural areas remains challenging, Dr. Vale continues, but our partnerships with agricultural technology companies have provided alternative collection methods. Genetic material harvested through routine veterinary procedures on livestock has proven surprisingly effective for human population mapping. "What the hell does that mean?" Jax whispers. Kale's face has gone ashen. Cross-species genetic contamination. If they're introducing human genetic markers into livestock, then tracking the animal genetics. They can map human populations through the food chain, Nova finishes. Every hamburger, every glass of milk, every piece of chicken carries genetic data. On screen, the meeting continues. A younger man, maybe 40, appears in a new window. His nameplate reads, Marcus Chen, Global Agricultural Systems. Nova notices the shared surname but feels no family connection, only revulsion. Agricultural vector deployment is exceeding expectations, Marcus reports. mRNA modification systems are now integrated into feed supplies for cattle, poultry and swine across North America and Europe. Human consumption data indicates 94% population exposure through dietary intake. Side effects, asks the WHO director. Minimal immediate impact as designed. However, fertility rates in test regions are down 23% year over year, with accelerating decline patterns. Autoimmune responses are appearing within expected parameters. Nova's hands shake as she realises what they're watching. These aren't plans being discussed. These are progress reports on operations already in motion. Lynx leans closer to the screen. That voice. I know that voice. A new participant joins the call, their video window appearing in the centre of the screen. The image is deliberately obscured. Shadows and lighting designed to hide identity. But the voice is clear and authoritative. Psychological conditioning remains our most effective vector, the shadowed figure reports. Media saturation campaigns have successfully normalised concepts of population reduction, climate-based selection, and voluntary extinction movements. Social media algorithms are amplifying despair, hopelessness, and anti-natalist sentiment across target demographics. Mental fatigue campaigns, the WHO director asks, exceeding projections. Suicide rates in target age ranges are up 34% year over year. Birth rates continue declining as planned. Most importantly, resistance to authority has decreased significantly. Population compliance with future directives is expected to be near universal. Jack stands up abruptly, knocking over their chair. They're not just poisoning our bodies, they're poisoning our minds. Nova pauses the video, needing a moment to process what they're witnessing. This isn't just biological warfare. It's psychological, social, environmental. They've weaponized everything we depend on to survive. Food, air, water, information, Lynx lists. They're not attacking civilization. They've turned civilization into the weapon. Kale sits down heavily, his scientific worldview crumbling and reforming around this new reality. The fertility decline, the autoimmune disorders, the psychological depression epidemics, it's all connected. It's all intentional. Nova resumes the video. The shadowed figure continues speaking. Phase 4. Preparation is nearly complete. Environmental triggers are in position. When activated, they will catalyze the biological modifications already present in target populations. Estimated timeline for full effect 18 months. The WHO director nods. Excellent. What about resistance potential? Minimal. Independent researchers who've approached relevant discoveries have been discredited, defunded, or eliminated from academic and professional positions. Media coverage of related topics has been successfully redirected toward established conspiracy theory frameworks, ensuring any accurate information is dismissed as paranoid delusion. Nova feels the walls of their warehouse closing in. How many others have found pieces of this puzzle? How many have been silenced? Dr. Vale, the shadowed figure continues. Status report on asset protection. Dr. Vale reappears on screen. Protection protocols are operational. All essential personnel and their families have received modified treatments. Genetic compatibility with post-implementation environment is confirmed. We estimate a protected population of approximately 500,000 globally. 500,000, Jax repeats numbly, out of 7 billion. The video quality starts to degrade as the satellite connection becomes unstable. But one final exchange comes through clearly. Any concerns about detection? Unlikely. The full scope of the operation requires integration of data from medical, agricultural, environmental, technological and psychological sources. No single research team or intelligence agency has access to all vectors simultaneously. Except, the WHO director adds with something approaching dark humour, they would need to be simultaneously expert in cryptography, intelligence gathering, virology, social engineering, and information systems. The shadowed figure laughs. The probability of such a team existing with access to the right data and the motivation to pursue it is essentially zero. The connection dies, leaving their warehouse in silence. Nova, Lynx, Jax, and Kael look at each other across the digital evidence of humanity's planned extinction. Well, Nova says finally, I guess we're essentially zero. But as the four of them return to their workstations, preparing to dive deeper into the nightmare they've uncovered, none of them notice the small indicator light on Jax's communication system. The light that shows someone has been monitoring their network traffic. The light that means their essentially zero probability team has just become a confirmed threat. The light that means Phase 4 might be starting ahead of schedule. The warehouse's early warning system starts screaming at 4:17 a.m, 3 hours after they finished analysing the intercepted conference call. Nova jolts awake from her desk, where she'd fallen asleep reviewing genetic modification patents. The screens around her flash red as multiple intrusion detection systems trigger simultaneously. "Lynx!" she shouts, adrenaline cutting through exhaustion. "We've got company!" Lynx rolls out of his sleeping bag, grabbing his laptop and a go bag he keeps permanently packed, old habits from his intelligence days. "What kind of company?" "The kind that uses military-grade network penetration tools," Nova responds, her fingers flying across keyboards as she tries to lock down their systems. "Someone's been watching us." Jax appears from the back room, purple hair messy from sleep but their eyes sharp with focus. "How long have they been in our network?" "Unknown," Nova admits, fighting a losing battle against the intrusion. "But they've got root access to our communication systems. They've seen everything." Kale emerges from his makeshift lab, clutching a hard drive. "I've backed up all the biological data to an isolated system. If we lose the main servers..." "We're losing everything," Nova confirms, watching as file after file disappears from their local storage. They're not just infiltrating, they're sanitizing, removing all traces of what we've found. But even as their digital fortress crumbles around them, Nova's mind races ahead to their backup protocols. Years of paranoia have taught her to prepare for exactly this scenario. "Jax, activate the mesh network. Lynx, get the satellite uplink ready. We're going distributed." The warehouse transforms as hidden systems come online. What appeared to be a simple hacker den reveals itself as a sophisticated intelligence operation. Jax's workstation unfolds into a multi-array communication hub. Lynx produces equipment that definitely didn't come from civilian sources. Nova's desk reveals hidden servers and backup power systems. "Professor," Nova calls, "how much of your research is stored offline?" "Everything critical," Kale confirms. "I learned not to trust cloud storage after they destroyed my academic career." As their attackers continue dismantling their main systems, the team executes an evacuation protocol they've rehearsed, but hoped never to use. Critical files transfer to multiple secure locations. Communication channels shift to encrypted networks. Physical evidence gets packed into go bags. But Nova isn't running yet. Instead, she's doing something that would seem insane to anyone who doesn't understand her particular brand of digital warfare. She's tracing the intrusion back to its source. "What are you doing?" Lynx demands, watching her work as alarms continue screaming around them. "If they're watching us," Nova says through gritted teeth, "then we're watching them back." Her screen fills with a network traffic analysis, packet traces, and routing information. The attack is sophisticated, routed through multiple proxy servers and anonymization networks. But sophistication creates complexity, and complexity creates vulnerabilities. "There," she breathes, highlighting a data stream. "They're not just stealing our files, they're uploading something." The upload completes just as Nova isolates the data stream, a single file placed carefully in their system logs where it would be discovered during any forensic analysis. Child pornography, Lynx realizes, reading the file metadata. They're setting us up when law enforcement finds this place. "We'll be dismissed as perverts and criminals instead of researchers," Nova finishes. "Brilliant. Completely discredit us while making sure no one looks too closely at what we actually found." But Nova's trace has revealed something else, the real location of their attackers, and it's not some anonymous hacker collective or foreign government. "They're operating out of the Protean Core building," she announces. "Dr. Harrison Vale's company. The same people we watched discussing humanity's extinction 3 hours ago." Jax finishes packing their equipment. "We need to leave, now." But Nova is still working, her fingers moving with the desperate speed of someone who knows this might be their last chance. Not yet. If they're monitoring us in real time, if they know what we've discovered, then they know we're a threat, which means... Her screen fills with a new data stream. Not an attack this time, but intercepted communications from the Protean Core building. They're having an emergency meeting, she realizes. Right now, about us. She patches the audio through their speakers, and suddenly the warehouse fills with voices they recognize from the earlier recording. "Confirmed they have the Phase 3 documentation," Dr. Vale's voice reports. "Full technical specifications, implementation timelines, biological modification protocols." "How is that possible?" The WHO director's voice sounds strained. "That information is compartmentalized across 17 different security classifications. Unknown, but their research capabilities suggest state-level intelligence resources. We may have a coordinated opposition." A new voice joins the call, the shadowed figure from the earlier recording, though now speaking with urgent authority rather than calm confidence. "Irrelevant. They know enough to compromise the entire operation if they go public. We need immediate containment." "What kind of containment?" Dr. Vale asks. "Total. The team, their research, their facility. Make it look like a lab accident. Chemical fire, explosion, whatever ensures complete evidence destruction." Nova's blood turns to ice as she realizes what they're planning. "How long do we have?" the WHO director asks. "Tactical team is en route, 20 minutes. Nova starts shutting down systems, her movements sharp with controlled panic. We're blown. They're sending a kill team. 20 minutes? Jax checks their watch. That's not enough time to... "It's enough time to do one thing," Nova interrupts, pulling up her final contingency protocol. "We can't save ourselves, but we can save the evidence." She begins uploading their complete research archive to a decentralized network. Blockchain-based storage systems that can't be deleted or controlled by any single authority. But the upload is massive, and their internet connection is already compromised. "Upload time, 17 minutes, her system reports. 3 minutes to spare, Lynx says grimly, checking his weapons, if their timeline is accurate. But as if summoned by his words, new alarms start screaming. Motion sensors around the warehouse perimeter. Thermal imaging detecting multiple vehicles approaching from different directions. They lied about the timeline, Nova realizes. The team is already here. Through the grimy windows, they can see black SUVs surrounding the building. Tactical lights sweep across the walls. Radio chatter echoes from outside, professional, coordinated, lethal. Upload progress, 32%, her computer announces. Nova looks at her team, her friends, her fellow travellers in the digital underground. Jax with their fierce intelligence and boundless optimism. Lynx with his warrior's honour and protective instincts. Kale with his scientist's dedication to truth above comfort. I need 8 more minutes to finish the upload, she says quietly. Can you give me 8 minutes? Lynx checks his rifle, the same model he carried during his government service. Against a professional tactical team? In an indefensible position? He looks around the warehouse, their home, their sanctuary, their last stand. Yeah, he says finally, we can give you 8 minutes. As the first breaching charges explode against the warehouse doors, Nova's fingers continue dancing across her keyboard, uploading humanity's final testimony to the digital wind. Outside, boots pound against concrete and orders are shouted in tactical shorthand. Inside, 4 people who stumbled across the end of the world fight to make sure someone, somewhere, will know what really happened to the human race. The upload bar crawls toward completion, 47%, 48%, Sasipgu Peosentu, and in the distance sirens wail, though whether they're coming to help or to clean up the mess, nobody can tell. Upload progress, 73%. Nova's fingers move across the keyboard with mechanical precision, even as automatic weapons fire tears through the warehouse's steel walls. Lynx and Jax have improvised a defensive position behind stacked servers, returning fire with the small arsenal Lynx maintained for exactly this scenario. Kyle crouches beside Nova, clutching his backup drives like sacred relics. How much longer? Lynx shouts over the gunfire, ejecting an empty magazine. 3 minutes, Nova responds, sweat dripping onto her keyboard as she maintains the upload connection, despite power fluctuations from damaged systems. A tactical team member appears at a broken window. Jax takes him down with a shot that would make their grandfather proud. The same grandfather who taught them to shoot cans off fence posts in rural Oregon, never imagining his lessons would one day be used to defend the future of human civilization. Upload progress, 81%. Nova! Kale shouts, pointing at the main screen. They're jamming our satellite connection. She looks up to see their upload speed dropping rapidly. The decentralized network storage is failing as targeted electromagnetic pulses disrupt their communication arrays. Years of preparation, layers of redundancy, multiple backup systems, all being systematically neutralized by an enemy who understands their capabilities better than they understand themselves. Switch to the hard line, she orders, pulling cables from emergency ports hidden beneath the floor. If the satellites are down, we go terrestrial. But even as she reroutes their connection through buried fibre optic cables, her screens show the truth. Their attackers aren't just soldiers. They're technicians, equipped with signal intelligence gear and digital warfare tools. This isn't a military assault, it's a surgical data extraction and elimination operation. Upload progress, 89%. They're inside the network, Nova realises, watching as files begin corrupting during transfer. They're not jamming the connection, they're poisoning it. Malicious code floods through their internet connection, targeting not just their local systems, but the destination servers themselves. Wherever they try to upload their evidence, the same destructive algorithms follow, erasing data as fast as they can transmit it. 90 seconds, Lynx reports, reloading his rifle. That's all I can give you. Nova's mind races through alternatives. Local storage, compromised. Cloud servers, compromised. Peer-to-peer networks, compromised. Everywhere they turn, the digital tentacles of their enemies have already reached. But there's one option they haven't tried. One network that exists outside the normal channels of internet communication. Jax, she shouts. Emergency radio protocols. Can you reach the ham radio networks? Jax nods, understanding immediately. While their enemies have prepared for digital warfare, they might not have anticipated analog communication methods, ancient radio technology that predates the internet by decades. As Jax frantically assembles radio equipment, Nova begins compressing their data files into formats suitable for audio transmission. Everything they've discovered about Project Aegis, the population reduction protocols, the biological modification systems, compressed into digital packets that can be transmitted over shortwave radio frequencies. Upload progress, 94%, transmission corrupted. Their internet connection dies completely as electromagnetic pulse weapons finish destroying their communication arrays. But Jax's radio equipment sparks to life, connecting them to a network of amateur radio operators who maintain communication protocols independent of corporate or government control. This is Emergency Station Alpha calling CQ Emergency, Jax broadcasts. We have critical data for immediate relay to all stations. Repeat, critical data for immediate relay. Responses crackle back from radio operators across the country, retired engineers, electronics hobbyists, disaster relief volunteers, people who maintain the last truly free communication network on the planet. Nova begins transmitting their compressed data files, sending fragments to different radio operators with instructions for reassembly and distribution. It's slow, inefficient and incomplete, but it's working. Until the lights go out. Emergency power kicks in, bathing the warehouse in red light as their main electrical systems fail. Through the broken windows they can see technicians working on power lines, systematically isolating the building from the electrical grid. They're cutting everything, Kale observes. Power, internet, radio frequency spectrum, complete communication isolation. Nova's laptop switched to battery power, giving her perhaps 10 minutes of operation before total system failure. She continues transmitting data packets over Jax's radio equipment, but the process is agonizingly slow. "Nova!" Lynx calls urgently. "Movement on the roof. They're coming through the skylights." She looks up to see tactical team members rappelling through the warehouse's ceiling. Professional, coordinated, equipped with night vision and thermal imaging. In 30 seconds, they'll have complete control of the space. In 30 seconds, Project Aegis will remain humanity's best-kept secret. But Nova has one final option. One last desperate gambit that violates every principle of operational security she's ever followed. She activates her personal phone's livestream function and begins broadcasting directly to social media. "My name is Nova Chen," she says, looking directly into the camera as gunfire echoes around her. "If you're watching this, you need to know that the world's governments and corporations are planning to kill most of the human race." Her phone screen shows viewer counts climbing rapidly. Hundreds, then thousands of people drawn by the chaos and violence of her live stream. They call it Project Aegis, population reduction through biological modification. They've poisoned the vaccines, contaminated the food supply, weaponized the environmental monitoring systems. Tactical team members breach their defensive position. Lynx falls, blood spreading across the concrete floor. Jax continues working the radio, transmitting data even as red laser sights dance across their chest. The timeline is 18 months, Nova continues, holding the phone steady despite the chaos. They've already begun implementation. If you've been vaccinated, if you eat processed food, if you use smart devices, you're already carrying the biological modifications they need to. A tactical team member's rifle butt smashes into her skull, sending the phone spinning across the concrete floor. The livestream continues, showing a sideways view of combat boots and spreading pools of blood, but the damage is done. In the 3 minutes her stream was active, over 50,000 people watched Nova Chen's final testimony. And in the age of social media, 50,000 becomes 5 million in a matter of hours. The last thing her phone's camera captures before the screen goes black is a gloved hand reaching down to pick it up. In the background, a voice speaks with calm authority. "Sanitize everything. No evidence, no witnesses, no trace this facility ever existed." Then static, then silence, then nothing. 6 months later. The official report from the Woodland Fire Department described it as a tragic industrial accident. Improper storage of chemical solvents in a converted warehouse led to an explosion that killed 4 squatters and destroyed the building completely. Local news covered it for exactly 1 day before moving on to more compelling stories. The livestream that briefly appeared on various social media platforms was quickly removed for violating community guidelines against violent content and misinformation. Users who tried to share or discuss it found their accounts suspended or shadow banned. Within a week it had been scrubbed from mainstream platforms entirely. But the internet remembers everything, especially the things someone desperately wants forgotten. On encrypted message boards and dark web forums, fragments of Nova's final broadcast circulate like digital samizdat. Grainy screenshots, audio clips, transcribed quotes passed from user to user through carefully maintained networks of paranoid technologists and dedicated conspiracy researchers. Truth Seeker 2030 posts on an anonymous forum. Anyone else remember that warehouse livestream from 6 months ago? The girl talking about Project Aegis? Can't find it anywhere now, but I swear I downloaded a copy. Digital Ghost responds. Had the same video. File corrupted when I tried to open it last week. All my Aegis research just disappeared, like it was never there. Red Pill Reality chimes in. Same here. But I remember what she said. Population reduction, biological modifications, food supply contamination, 18 months. We're down to 12 months now. The conversations multiply across platforms that exist in the shadows of the normal internet. Ham radio operators share fragments of the data Jax transmitted in those final minutes. Academic researchers quietly compare notes about unusual patterns in pharmaceutical trials and agricultural modifications. Environmental scientists notice anomalies that match the warnings from a warehouse that officially never existed. Dr. Sarah Martinez, epidemiologist at UC Davis, publishes a paper about unexplained fertility decline in rural agricultural communities. She doesn't mention Project Aegis directly, but her data matches the patterns Nova's team identified with unsettling accuracy. Professor David Kim at MIT releases research about novel proteins found in certain vaccine batches, proteins with no apparent therapeutic function. His funding gets cut 3 weeks later, and his department chair suggests he focus on less controversial research topics. Environmental journalist Lisa Chen, no relation to Nova despite the shared surname, investigates reports of unusual biometric surveillance equipment appearing in remote areas. Her article gets killed by her editor, who explains that the magazine's parent company has concerns about unfounded conspiracy theories. But each cancelled publication, each suppressed research project, each deleted social media post creates a new data point in a pattern that becomes hard to ignore. The truth spreads like a virus through the digital underground. 12 months later, Maya Patel is 17 years old and has never heard of Nova Chen, Lynx Rodriguez, Jax Morrison, or Professor Kale. She lives in a small village in rural India, where internet access is limited, and social media is considered a luxury for urban elites. But Maya is smart, curious, and has access to her school's computer lab 3 days a week. She spends her time learning about environmental science, genetic engineering, and the intersection of technology and biology. Her dream is to study at a Western university and help solve the world's agricultural challenges. It's during one of these computer lab sessions that she finds the flash drive. Buried in a box of discarded electronics donated to the school, wrapped in plastic and electrical tape like someone tried very hard to preserve it. The label, written in faded ink, reads, Population Zero Proof.Vault. Maya plugs it into the computer, expecting maybe some students' old homework or family photos. Instead, she finds 847 gigabytes of encrypted data files, research documents, intercepted communications, and video recordings. She finds genetic modification protocols, pharmaceutical patents, agricultural contamination systems, and psychological warfare strategies. She finds the complete archive of everything Nova Chen's team discovered about Project Aegis. The encryption is military grade, but Maya is patient and clever. She spends 3 weeks cracking the access codes, working during lunch breaks and staying after school until the janitor kicks her out. When she finally opens the files, she spends another week just trying to understand what she's looking at. Population reduction through coordinated biological intervention. Genetic modification systems activated by environmental triggers. Food chain contamination designed to cause sterility and immune system failure. Psychological warfare campaigns to normalize extinction and reduce resistance to authority. A timeline that originally targeted 2030, but has been accelerated to 2027. Maya realizes she's looking at the blueprint for humanity's planned extinction, and according to the timestamps on the most recent files, the final phase is scheduled to begin in 6 months. She copies everything to multiple storage devices and begins the careful process of verification, cross-referencing patent filings, pharmaceutical research, agricultural modifications, environmental monitoring data. Every piece of evidence Nova's team gathered, Maya confirms through independent research. It's all true, it's all happening, and almost nobody knows. But Maya Patel is 17 years old, raised in a culture that reveres education and truth-telling above personal safety. She doesn't consider keeping the information secret. She doesn't wonder if she might be wrong. She doesn't worry about the consequences of speaking truth to power. She uploads everything to every platform she can access. WikiLeaks, anonymous file-sharing networks, academic databases, social media platforms, government transparency websites, journalist tip lines, activist organisations, environmental groups, medical research communities. She translates key documents into 17 languages and distributes them through international networks. She creates simplified summaries for non-technical audiences and detailed analyses for subject matter experts. She floods the internet with the truth about Project Aegis, and this time it's too late to stop the signal. Within hours, Maya's uploads are being downloaded thousands of times. Within days, the downloads become millions. Major news outlets pick up the story. Government officials demand investigations. International health organisations call emergency sessions. The carefully orchestrated plan to reduce human population through biological warfare becomes the most documented conspiracy in human history. Dr. Harrison Vale attempts to discredit the documents as sophisticated forgeries. The WHO director claims the communications were taken out of context. Government officials deny any knowledge of population reduction protocols. But the evidence is overwhelming, the documentation is comprehensive, and the verification is independent. Too many researchers, in too many countries, using too many different methodologies, all reach the same conclusion. Project Aegis is real, it's operational, and it's working. Global fertility rates have dropped 34% over the past 3 years. Autoimmune disorders have increased 78% in demographics that received certain vaccine formulations. Agricultural workers in modified crop regions show genetic markers consistent with engineered biological agents. Psychological depression and suicide rates have reached historic highs in precisely the age groups targeted by media manipulation campaigns. The population reduction protocol isn't a future threat. It's already killed millions of people. 18 months after the warehouse, Maya Patel stands before the International Criminal Court in The Hague, testifying about the greatest crime in human history. Behind her sits a display showing population statistics, fertility decline curves, mortality data, and genetic modification evidence. She holds up a small flash drive, the same one she found in a box of discarded electronics in her school's computer lab. This device, she tells the court, contains the complete records of Project Aegis, compiled by 4 researchers who died trying to warn the world about what was being done to us. She sets the drive on the witness stand. Nova Chen was 26 years old when she was murdered for discovering that our governments and corporations had poisoned the human race. Lynx Rodriguez was 32 when he died, defending her right to tell the truth. Jax Morrison was 21 when they gave their life to upload this evidence to radio networks around the world. Professor Kale was 58 when he was killed for asking the wrong questions about biological modification research. Maya looks directly at the defendants, pharmaceutical executives, government officials, and corporate leaders who sit in chains behind bulletproof glass. They died so that we could live. They died so that humanity would know what was done to us. They died so that the people responsible for the greatest genocide in history would be held accountable. She picks up the flash drive again. Their names were Nova, Lynx, Jax, and Kyle. They saved our species, and they want you to remember that the truth is always worth fighting for, no matter how powerful the people who want to hide it. The courtroom falls silent as Maya's testimony ends. In the gallery, family members of victims weep quietly. In the press section, journalists furiously type stories that will reach billions of readers within hours, and in a small village in rural India, a 17-year-old girl's computer science teacher watches the live broadcast and smiles proudly at his former student. Sometimes the truth finds a way. Sometimes the good guys win. Sometimes 4 people in a warehouse can save the world, even after they're gone. Epilogue. The network remembers, 5 years later, the Maya Patel Institute for Digital Truth and Transparency occupies a gleaming building in New Geneva, funded by reparations payments from the corporations responsible for Project Aegis. Its mission statement, carved in stone above the entrance, reads, "The network remembers everything, especially the things someone desperately wants forgotten." In the lobby, 4 portraits hang side by side. Nova Chen, cryptographer and digital warrior; Lynx Rodriguez, intelligence analyst and protector; Jax Morrison, social engineer and technological prodigy; Professor Kyle, virologist and truth-teller. Beneath their portraits a simple inscription: they found the code that wasn't meant to be found. Tourists and students pass by the portraits daily, most not knowing the full story of how 4 people in a converted warehouse prevented the extinction of human civilization. But the staff of the Institute know, the researchers working on digital rights and technological transparency know, the activists fighting against corporate surveillance and biological manipulation know. And late at night, when the building is empty and the servers hum quietly in climate-controlled rooms, network traffic monitors occasionally detect unusual patterns in the data streams. Fragments of code that shouldn't exist, routed through pathways that don't appear on any network topology. Some say it's just background noise, artifacts of old systems and deprecated protocols. Others believe it's something more, digital ghosts of 4 researchers who refuse to let death stop their work, still uploading, still broadcasting, still fighting to keep the truth alive in the spaces between the data. The network remembers everything, and sometimes, late at night in the digital underground, the network remembers back.